of the realities of COVID, the world. So, okay, pull some cards, but I did look up this because I was like, what does this mean? 'Twas Breelig and the slithy toves did gyra and gimble in the wave. So Breelig is 4 p.m., the time when you begin to boil things for dinner. Slithy, lithe, and slimy. Life is the same as active. Toves, curious creatures that are something like badger, something like lizard, something like like corkscrews. So maybe that's all the people in Washington. To gyra is to go round and round like a gyroscope. Well, that's par for the course in Washington. To gimbal, to make holes like a gimlet. Well, we got lots of holes in this city. That's no. The grass plot round a wave. The grass plot round a sundial. It is called like that because it goes a long way before it and a long way behind it. I don't know if anybody's following the political analogies there, but I do have to say, unfortunately, what was it, Carol Lewis, it's as applicable today as it was back then, as is William Shakespeare, which is Elizabethan time under Elizabeth I. So, plus que les choses y changent, plus qu'ils restent les mêmes. You know, this power over and paradigm and teach his own, and I'm just going to think about me. We'll bring this, not only this country down, but the world down, because it is global. And all the narcissists and psychopaths are at the lead, and they, you know, getting in all of these different manipulations all over the place on all the different fronts in order to consolidate their power bases. So let's pull, we'll do 2 cards. It's 8, 17. I mean, I already did 1 and I went over things. But oh, here we got some. Let me take those out. There's another one. Ooh, there's another one left out. Okay. Not enough there. Okay, I got 1 card that's left over. So, ooh, Hillary Clinton. We'll see. Okay, for the first pile, we've got 2 feminists. Oh, we've got a lot of feminists this evening. So we've got 2 feminists. First Lady Obama. Well, this actually goes into all of the, you know, all of the first ladies since Reagan, which I kind of covered a bit with Reagan, but I'll expand on that. For the second card, we have Maxine. Well, you can't see these because they're written in there. Maxine Waters, House Finance Committee. The squad, AOC and Omar are really the only ones, which is El Chador, which are the ones there. For pile number 2, we've got Maria Butina, founder, Right to Bear Arms, the Red Sparrow. To her. And then the second card, IMF mediator Gita Ravindra, Ethics Committee Olivia Graham, and Ozma's been special investigator. I already covered that. So I might even include like Hillary Clinton in there with those ladies. We'll see. Then for the third pile, we've got Alexander Nix, CEO, Cambridge Analytica, former, I guess, the Black Hat. And then for second card for pile number 3, okay, Sudha Shetty, she's at Berkeley. This gets into the Hague Convention on International Child Abduction. Karen Lewis, I've already, oh, I said it was Karen White, it's Karen Lewis. And another thing, which is with Paula Lucas, the American Overseas Domestic Violence Crisis Center. Okay. So yeah, we got quite a few feminists here. Let's see if I'll tell you, we're gonna drive everybody off a cliff. I mean, I couldn't believe, you know, everybody is living on in La La Land. In total denial, total denial. Okay, so let's, for the first one, let's do First Lady Obama, former First Lady Obama, and all the other First Ladies. So again, you know, gosh, sorry. I went into Reagan and how actually it's Nancy Pants Reagan who became the grande dame of Washington. The social climbing, Hollywood, B-rate actress who wants to grapple up the ladder of success. And, you know, apparently when she was a child, because her mother, you know, her mother got married, her mother had been on the stage, but her mother got married and you know, had Nancy. But, you know, her mother was one of these, oh, want to be a career woman, want to be a career woman. And she, you know, it's sad because her father, she's the one who said, you know, she never saw her father, kind of like what Meghan Markle is doing. But, you know, that was not the case. In fact, he was, you know, quite upset when she was adopted by, well, it would be Davis, I believe, is the surgeon. He was in Chicago. And her mother, real social climber as well. So she didn't make it. So her first husband, you know, seems like a pretty good guy, family guy. And the mother wanted to be, you know, the actress. So Nancy Reagan got left with her aunt in Maryland. And I forget which, but she, you know, it was in Bethesda, so she went to good school, but she was like the poor person. And she also had a weight problem and was really addicted to sugar. So her being skinny as a rail was also a lot of the pills and a bit of anorexia in there. I mean, I won't speculate if there was any bulimia, but, you know, definitely. You know, she always said a woman can never be too skinny or too rich. And, you know, this is Joan Crawford all the way. So this is who we get as our First Lady, Mommy Dearest. Needless to say, she installed a pretty oppressive paradigm, which of course, as was the intention of the Koch brothers, Fourth Reichers, you know, whatever, as I say, there's various factions working at the same time, on all sides. You know, she did what they wanted her to do. She really castrated her husband In fact, he ended up with Alzheimer's, and it doesn't surprise me. Then we get, you know, after that, you get into, after that was the Bush. That's Barbara Bush. I mean, she kind of always reminds me of the you know, on Dallas, JR, what's the other, Bobby Ewing's mother, except that was a nice version. I don't know if they, you know, when they came up with Dallas, they had the Bush family in mind. I really don't know. But that woman was a real piece of work. And in fact, well, I'll jump to the second Bush administration, because it's pretty much the same and went down the same road. I mean, they were just a continuation of Reagan. But oh, what's his name? What's his name? He's a psychiatrist over at GW, where the name will come to me. But he did Bush on the couch. He also did Obama on the couch. I haven't read the Obama on the couch yet, but I read the Bush on the couch, and I was like, ooh, yeah. And one of the things that, you know, which of course is going to be traumatic for a child, was George Bush Jr. His sister died when they were very, very young. I mean, you know, extremely young, toddlers. And he had been very, very close to this sister. I believe she was a few years older, like she was 5 years old when she passed. And it like was never talked about in the family or anything. It was just, you know, she was gone. So, you know, these kind of things, maybe people don't realize, but they are traumatic for young children. Particularly, I mean, any age, but particularly young children. And, you know, you have to discuss these things with them. Because it's kind of like, what's going on here? So, of course, that had an effect on the second Bush. And I mean, his wife, Mancy Pansy, you know, her mother-in-law, piece of work. And the second Bush wife, what's her name? Real, you know, as I say, Mancy Pansy. They did, I believe, after he left office, they did kind of separate, because I think, you know, he was, let's just say, had anger management problems. So we really have had dysfunctional people in the White House for a very, very, very long time. We can go back to Nixon. We can go back to, I think, McGovern, Ford, you know, well, I don't know, his wife did have problems, you know, was an alcoholic, but I don't know if that was so much her relationship with Ford or whether it was just Washington. So I'm not, because believe me, all, as I say, it's all in the research that all of these substance abuse or addiction problems, there's an underlying factor. So let's go back to the Clintons. I mean, you talk about how, I mean, they ushered in the death of the liberal class. This is Chris Hodges' book, and he does a very good job in explaining, maybe not all the whys and wherefores, which I try and fill in the gaps, but how that trajectory happened, really starting in the 80s, death of the liberal class, because the left, the yuppies and the preppies, I mean, you know, in the 60s and 70s, we had the hippies, the colleges were demonstrating and doing LSD and doing Woodstock and you know, totally opposite of what the preppies and the yuppies and Japs and all of the different minorities ushered in with debutante parties and living the good life and having a good life and snorting cocaine and you know, partying. As I say, I fail to see the difference between spending all your time partying with cocaine and, you know, rock music, whatever you want, in these discotheques, or now they you know, Studio 54 was shut down. I mean, Jeffrey Epstein was just a modern version of Studio 54, gone international and underground. So, you know, what's the difference there if you're snorting cocaine or sipping wine? And the pretentiousness of people about wine. Oh, and don't even get me started on the beers. When I came back to DC, and I forget, I'm out with somebody, and so we're someplace, and I said, "Well, have a beer," and they said, "What kind?" What do you mean? Una caña, like whatever you got on tap. They bring me a beer list. It's like a wine list, and I was like, "You gotta keep kidding me." If you did this in Spain at a bar, they would laugh at you and probably throw the thing in your face. They stop bullshitting me. Dame una caña. Well, I don't know. Maybe the Spanish. Well, they have their wine, so you know, they're. But the wine industry, particularly in this country, has just gone down the same path as the Loire Valley and the French. For example, everybody with this Beaujolais Nouveau, you know how all of that got, you know, started and became the mode. And for example, the French embassy always does the, you know, that week. It was a sales pitch. It's up the sales for the because it's not a great wine at all. The other is champagne. Oh, this was much before that. Champagne, you know, I don't know if it was in the, you know, end of the 1800s, at the beginning of the, maybe, you know, the flapper era, where it became la mode and up the sales. And of course, the Champagne region in France, I mean, do not get me into a debate with the French and the Spanish on what is better for price, the French champagnes or the Spanish cavas. But I'm sorry, the cavas win every time. And if you want to get into, you know, price, as again, I say price, and that's changing a bit because, you know, Spain used to be poor and cheap, and so the labor was cheaper. But still, I'll go with Spanish wines over a French wine. And don't ever repeat that to any of the French people. I always say if we ever got into that discussion, I think they would petition the government to have my French nationality taken away. That I would be treasonous and traitorous to their wine industry. But just to, you know, to highlight, and I mean, the Americans have taken it to new levels. I went out to Middleburg. Sister and brother were here, so she wants to go out and visit a winery. So we go out there, and I'm just like, oh my Lord, this is a modern, Loire Valley. And it's pretentious. And I mean, at least when you go to the chateaus of the Loire Valley, I mean, they're no longer, Louis the 16th and all of those were gotten rid of. But I mean, it's spectacular. I mean, these are patrimonies. But that's an era that's gone. I mean, you certainly don't want to destroy all of these architectural things and all of the arts, but this is an era that is gone, because it ultimately you have to exploit people. But I'm sorry, Middleburg and what is it near San Francisco, above San Francisco, I can't remember the wine country there. And that gets into the whole Silicon Valley thing and pretentious, and that's fine. I mean, we should be developing our wine industry more than Boone's Farm, Strawberry Hill, and Gallo. That what was available in the 60s and into the 70s, and people started developing more of a palate for wine. But this whole era and all of them, and it's the first ladies. I mean, the social order has always been the women. I always say, oh, no. The reason that women didn't have access to property and money was to put men at equal standing with women, because at least they held the purse strings, whereas the woman held the leash on the men. Now, of course, that's that's not always true, but women, real women, instead of these little whiny idiots that have risen to power, know how to handle situations. And they get better at it with time, believe it or not. That's why keeping us out of the workplace and just opting in for all of the young girls, the jail baits, not working for you guys on either side. They're setting you up with the jail baits, and also creating havoc in the process. So yeah, so now we've got First Lady Biden. I know she insists on being, her title is doctor, but well, this is again, where's your priority? Your career? Because she's in education. The education systems, not only in this country, but everywhere. And the British, the French, and the American systems are kind of at the lead. Well, the Germans would contest that, but and Switzerland, I think it's similar to the French. But those are kind of the educational systems that at least at present are at the lead. Now, there's good things in each of them. I mean, I was educated in the British system as well as the American system. There's good things on both sides, bad things on both sides. And then my children were always in the French system. Again, there are some good things there, bad things there. I mean, one of my favorite is when my ex, who was always educated in the French system, because I told him, I said, oh, I think I might have told this, the professors loved me because I listened to what they had to say, and then I'd shoot up my hand and say, I disagree. And I come out with my spiel, and they were always like, I mean, the teachers that were good loved me because I actually participated and tried to initiate some sort of conversation instead of going, how many words do we have to have for that essay? So, you know, the other ones didn't appreciate. Oh, I got my share of discrimination, and I realized, you know, teachers are people too, and sometimes they discriminate in grades because they just didn't like you. Because believe me, I would never contest if you gave me a, you know, a C. I didn't like a D. I think I got it once. And I know what you're talking about. This is so boring and stupid. Why am I gonna waste my time? Here I passed enough tests to get me past your stupid class. But if I was interested in the subject and somebody didn't give me a point, I'm going, oh, wait a second, I deserve this. It was out of the principle. I couldn't care less about. I mean, that was always the problem. I didn't care about being a straight A student. And that is the most ridiculous thing. This is one of the problems in all of this testing. And we've got to, as I said, I was like, make it interesting and I'll be interested. And a lot of our problems, are that. So, you know, First Lady Biden, what are you doing? I mean, seems to me, as I say, I don't much too much. Kamala Harris is really the first lady, and even perhaps taking the lead as president. I don't know, what because Biden seems pretty out of it. So, you know, what's going on in the Oval Office, I really don't know. But it lacks leadership. And I think the only leadership it really has is Kamala Harris. And I think if you watch the other videos, Kamala Harris, has come from the judicial system that is part of the new Jim Crow. The black, she's black, Hindu. I mean, because this gets into the mediation and all of the issues within the Hindu culture. Because if you compare the Hindu culture with the Muslim, which is because the Hindus are passive aggressive, whereas within the Muslim or Arab world, as I say, these are different groups that a lot of people in the West, I mean, even I would be like, excuse me, maybe correct me on all of these different groups, but it's not homogenous, just like in the West. So there's this passive aggressive, and you can see it with the Indians, the Pakistani, Sri Lankans I've seen, but the people of that region and the women, because again, this gets into the women, are, meditation and kumbaya stuff. Now, there's a place for that. As I say, it's a balance. Whereas with the Arabs, Muslims, it's much more of a physical violence, conflictual. So you see the comparison there, that neither side of that is working. In fact, there was one story, this gets into sexual harassment type of stuff. I had talked about this in the United States when I was working, but I was in Tunisia on vacation, and we were there for 2 weeks. It was at a Club Med. My youngest, he was 3 months old. but it was one of the best vacations I ever had because I actually got to like sit down. And my kids were in the guarderia. Oh, my youngest, he was the star, this 3-month-old baby. And even the women in there were like, don't come around, because he sees you and he starts, you know, he'll start to cry, but otherwise he's fine. And I'd be like, is he hungry? You know, every hour is he okay? From the corner. And I'm like, oh, I can sit down at the swimming pool and not have to be, you know, I got a toddler and a newborn. So anyway, I was like, oh, it was the most, you know, descansando vacation I think I ever had. But anyway, so my sister had come the second week and we went to the flea market. I'd gone, you know, that was an hour trip. I could do that. I'd gone the week before with my husband, and you know, it was a typical, well, it's not a souk, it's an Alpha. I mean, we had been through Morocco, he's from Morocco, and you know, the same type of thing you find in Morocco with the artisan stuff. And I mean, I love these places. And so when my sister came, I said, well, I'm going to take my sister. He said, well, you know, I've already been there, so I'm not coming. I'm like, well, I'll go by myself with my sister. You can't go 2 women by yourselves. I was like, you're crazy. This is a tourist place. This is not, you know, Saudi Arabia. I mean, my Lord. You know, you're from Morocco, and we went through Morocco, you know, I mean, it was just ludicrous. I knew it was because he didn't want me, you know, ever doing anything. So I didn't know we're going. So we went and well, I found this bowl that I'll tell that afterwards. But so in fact, this was part of it. So I found this bowl made out of olive tree bark, and I loved it. I was like, oh my God. So I even traded the troque because I didn't have my own money, I think. So I was like, oh, well, here's this wallet. This is a stupid wallet. And then, you know, some scratch like vinyl, and I'm like, here, I'll give you. I mean, this is, see, you know, I'm not into all of this negotiations, you know, in a lot of what's going on in the Western world. But when you go to the souks or you go to these markets with these people, particularly, you know, the artisan stuff, it's offensive if you don't schmooze and talk to them. And also it's a game of negotiating the price. Because if you're in you know, an obnoxious American, oh, whatever, I just have lots of money, and you know, you leave a really bad impression. Really, you do. I mean, I have the advantage that I speak French, but you know, you got to get in there. They're always going to start up with a higher price, but it's part of the charm of you know, the market. And then you got to negotiate. Oh, but it's really expensive. No. Then they respect you. I promise you. Then they respect you. If you come in there and throw a wad of money down and you don't care what the price is, they're like, what arrogant assholes, imperialist assholes with like lots of money who don't appreciate, you know, the work and everything that goes into it. So yeah, I always, you know, get in and talk to these guys, and I mean, I did that in Colombia all the time. But so one of the guys, he kind of puts his arm around me, which in the West, I mean, that wouldn't, you know, there was no problem, there was no, you know, but for the Muslim guys. And I told him, I said, oh, my husband was born in Morocco. Now, I didn't tell him he was Spanish, born in Morocco. They just assumed he was Moroccan. And the other guy in the group, he said, take your hand off. Her husband's Moroccan. you don't touch it. So the point I want to make with this elongated story with the macho Spaniard who's being ridiculous, but you know, if you look at the hedonism and the you know, fornicating, I mean, you know, the narcissism, hedonism, all of that, you know, spend. I mean, yes, okay, they're doing it in the Arab world, but they're also kind of following the lead of the Western world in that respect. But at the same time, they don't want their women corrupted and becoming whores like the American women and the Western women, which is from the feminist movement. You know, as I say, if you go on to war and domestic terrorism, the bibliography, that's most of the, after that, you know, they hacked in. But the books that I read up to, I think, about 2015, and that's basically, I mean, it does get into governance, but it is primarily all of the things on family court, the feminists, and all of that related. And the evidence is there. You know, these women haven't been pursued under libel, so I'm assuming that it's all true. I mean, you know, so why isn't anyone looking at all this stuff and saying, what the F? We gotta do something. Houston, we got a problem. And all the little first ladies, it's not what the founding fathers had in mind for the presidency or the first ladies. So, okay, let's go with the second pile. Well, we're with the feminist. Since I had an extra card with Hillary Clinton, I put it with this one. Because it you know, it gets into all the feminists. And this one, it has the IMF mediator, which is Gita Ravindra, ethics committee. Well, she's the ethics advisor. There's the two other people who are on the committee. Bunch of brain dead puppets. Olivia Graham. Then there's an ombudsman and special investigator. I didn't meet with these people. They did get a letter from me, but I didn't meet them regarding my report, workplace bullying in the IMF, that was submitted in March 2016. Then, you know, Hillary Clinton, feminist. I mean, it's the same MO. It's the same little gang, interconnected, interrelated. But, you know, this is what I'm trying to say. These networks, it's not linear. You know, you can see some of those things on the internet that explain all of these different lines going in all of these different directions. So it's not always linear, but there is a connection, and there is a homogeneous agenda of all of these feminists. And that, you know, in terms of, I try and explain that, like, the blacks and the browns, because this gets into the Muslim population, where we see the men, blacks and the browns in this country have been targeted. But the blacks and the brown women, and you know, there's the group that's grappling up the ladder of success and getting into power, like the Obamas. Yet they're selling out the people that they left behind. And they just want, you know, the power and glory and money for themselves. Clintons are no different. Oh, I guess I didn't talk about First Lady Michelle, but I think I've already spoken about her. I mean, one of the things I was talking about this earlier with siblings. Her mochi and waffles. She's got this book. It's just like Meghan Markle with her bench book. I mean, I don't know if any of you, I'm sure none of you men have read that, or even understand the significance of these books, which are bullshit for kids. These are not the stories that the classics really, and it's not just the classics, you know, Walt Disney, I'm sure he's turning in his grave, what's going on there. But, you know, the original Walt Disney's, all of those, you know, children's stories, not just because you have the Grimms, which is the dark side, which are important as well, because those have some important messages in them. But then, you know, I don't know, there was the Mermaid one, which was great. The Beauty and the Beast. I mean, oh my God, Bambi, my youngest son. But see, this also, I won't go into details, but it was important for him in this separation from me. And that's a process for babies and toddlers to realize that they're not, you know, that they are people of themselves. I mean, I won't get into all of those things, but these stories are extremely important. Dr. Seuss, they banned some of this Dr. Seuss. Now, my siblings were telling me one of the things was because one had slanted eyes and was, you know, dressed in Asian. I said, you gotta be kidding me. I was just seeing how in Korea they're getting back into the traditional dress. I was like, this is wacko stuff, because Dr. Seuss is great for kids. You know, my friend Pia, she's a child, she's a psychiatrist in Colombia, and her work is working with children through storytelling rather than drugging them up. And I sent her a lot of these, I scanned it and I emailed it to her. We were in Madrid by this time. She was like, these stories are fabulous. Curious George, I forget, but I know Dr. Seuss was in there. And, you know, the more modern American ones that aren't necessarily known with the Grimms and the other stuff. But the message in these stories, that's why they've lasted for so long. And they are very important for children to make sense of the world. And I mean, particularly this mochi and waffle thing of Michelle Obama, I was horrified. I mean, I didn't look at the bench, but I imagine it's the same MO. The messages, I mean, the message in this mochi and waffles, no, it's very materialistic, very narcissistic. No, I was like, what the? No. See, man, I know you guys don't even think about this stuff, but I can assure you it is extremely important in developing populations, you know, from when they're young children to the time that they're adults, and it's a process. Patty Davis, Nancy Davis Reagan, Nancy Reagan's daughter, said something very good in her book. Was it Things, the Way Things Ought to? No, that's another one. Sorry. Anyway, Nancy's Reagan's book about her mother. Sorry, my mind's going. That like her parents, she thinks that, you know, her parents really didn't know how to deal with the different state, you know, that they loved babies and toddlers. They're all cute. Everybody loves babies and toddlers. But, you know, they just didn't know how to deal with the different stages that their children were going through. And my parents were my Lord, my mother. And, you know, my father also, he came from a very antiquated, traditional Southern upbringing. So even, you know, sometimes I'm like, wait, that wasn't so good. And my mother was just a, you know, Joan Crawford. But part of the problem, I agree with Patty Davis, is that they just don't know how to deal with the different stages and all of the things that the children are going through. So they, yeah, control. Just do as I tell you. Control. And, you know, when I was pregnant with my first child, I mean, my Bible became Dr. Spock's book. And you know, years later, I had heard somebody say, oh, Dr. Spock just, he wants to, you know, all women to be perfect mothers and perfect, well, not wives, but perfect mothers. And I was like, that's not true. Because one of the things that Dr. Spock even says, and this I always say to particularly mothers who are pregnant with their first child, everybody's going to tell you what you should be doing. You know what the most important thing is? Listen to yourself and your baby, and don't let everybody, you know, this, that, particularly your mother-in-law or your mother, if they're wackos. Yeah. So each child is different, and each child has different needs and needs to have different boundaries sometimes set. As I say, each child is different, so you know, but they do need to be guided through the different stages until adult, I mean, even into adulthood. I mean, you know, when they're starting their careers and everything that they go through, it's all important. And it's important that they know, I mean, you know, they always know that, you know, you give them freer and freer reign, but at the same time, they always know that you know, if they fall, bruise their knees, the knee bruising gets bigger as they get older. You know, you're there to help them pick up and move forward. I mean, all of this, and all of this has to change instead of being all partying all the time. I mean, when we left Bogota, I was kind of almost glad because we had such a busy social life. I mean, you know, I'm on the board of the Bogota, you know, there's lots of stuff going on. My husband, he has a, you know, more important, he got a promotion. That's how he ended up the director. You know, he crashed. So, I mean, we were going 24/7. And, you know, I was like, well, if I wanted this life, I would have stayed in the United States and bought into all of that. So, you know, I mean, I loved Bogota, but, you know, anybody who wants that kind of life really think hard about it, because it's a merry-go-round. Yeah, we need social gatherings. We need to I mean, you know, that's kind of how I came up with global expats. But just pretentious partying needs to stop. So, sorry, I got off track. I guess I had already, you know, spoken about Gita Ravindra. She's Indian. She's the mediator over at the IMF, and was the one that I met with, who said to me that my problem was that I'm not conciliatory enough. Now, this woman I had investigated her before I went into that meeting, of course. She had a book and read through the whole thing, but it was another kumbaya, Indian, you know, let's meditate and I'm a modern woman in an Indian mirror. I mean, you know, they beat that dead horse all over the place. And it's all, you know, everybody's playing either the brown card, the black card, the yellow card, or the LGBT or the women card. Everybody's looking for an angle. It shouldn't be about looking for an angle. It should be about who is the most competent person for that position, regardless of anything. I mean, that's how you're going to get equality and good governance and you know, some professionalism and in the workplace. So that was, you know, Gita Ravindra. I promise you, I wanted to go and strangle that little lady when she said that to me. Then again, Olivia Graham, one of my favorite stories. Well, this is the first time I've ever heard that it's illegal, but not immoral. I mean, you know, there are those moments in the past 15 years where I'm meeting with these people and I'm like, do you realize what you just said? And I think most of the time we don't. They don't realize the gravity of and the information that they're giving to me. So as I say, the ombudsman special investigator I didn't meet with, but they did get an email. So anybody who's gotten a letter or an email, you should check your emails and actually read. Because I've been keeping track. I keep my records. They may be all over the place in US space, but I keep my records. So, you know, Hillary Clinton, same MO. It just, what do we got here? Yeah. The Democrats in clinic monarchy sold out to corporate America. Alpha-Dominance Feminists who want to rule the world. Now, with the Clinton administration, it was the 2016 elections, going up to the 2000 elections. And Clinton, there's the story, I think it's Loretta Lynch, I might be mistaken on that, the story of him meeting with is an airplane on tarmac, and he went in and he shouldn't have met with her. I think it might have been about the Comey, the email, but that was going on, and he was trying to put pressure on her to suppress it. And the story goes, the speculation goes that, you know what we did to our chief of staff? What was his name? I can't remember. This was going back to the beginning of the Clinton. We can do that.
because this, I did see some, it wasn't much, but it was like some letters and the story. Again, you know, when I look at things and evidence, these are legitimate. This was, so the story is that when they were in Arkansas, you know, I guess after he's governor, before he runs, right before he runs, she's tired of his philandering and gonna get a divorce. So she hires a private detective. Well, when I got into my divorce, I found how prevalent that was when they told me that I should hire a private detective to follow my husband. I was like, are you crazy? Because he had a private detective on me. I was like, well, what are you people doing here? That's not what this is about. So and apparently it wasn't too difficult to get the goods on Bill Clinton. But the photos were out there. Then he gets elected into office, and it was his chief of staff, and I forget the name. He was, you know, found dead. It was in Washington, I forget, you know, I don't think it was Rock Creek Park, but you know, some mysterious place, and murdered. So the speculation was that he had information, and that the photographer who had taken the photos, they were in contact, or somehow the Clinton, this is years ago that I read this, but somehow the Clintons were threatened by these photos and this coming out, and that the photographer, when he saw that this chief of staff had been murdered, I think it was his son, who said, oh God, my father said, I'm next. So as I say, there's no smoking gun. You cannot convict a person on this type of stuff. But it does raise questions when you look at the big picture. And the threat, as I said, I think it was Loretta Lynch, maybe mistaken, but it was an airplane farm, you know, on a tarmac, and she was in the airplane and he went to say hi. And there was a big scandal because he shouldn't have been anywhere near her. And the speculation was that he was threatening her. I don't know. What I know about the Clintons, it wouldn't surprise me. I'm sorry, this idea that it's only Putin who goes assassinating people that they don't like, even of their own. Not just the Russians are doing that, and don't think that everybody's not doing that. I mean, and this spying, and it really has to stop, and it's not necessary. If everybody was working together, then they wouldn't have to be spying on each other. Oh my God, I learned that with my mother, because it's all about gossip and backstabbing and advancing your little Machiavellian platform. Oh, the women out there will know what I'm talking about. And you have to listen very carefully. I mean, when this is Versailles at the doors, to what the little maneuvering is going on, and the little gossiping. And there, you listen to the gossip, you start putting the dots together. And you know, you don't have to be a big wig in the bit, you know, in all the meetings and steal confidential documents and stuff. You just have to be in there and actually open your eyes and listen to what everybody's saying to realize something's wrong here. And you, I want to see you in the principal's office. So I guess I got off, but it's still all related to the feminists. Well, since we're with the feminists, my goodness, I'm gonna go on again. We get to this, the Hague Convention on International Child Abduction. Sudhi Shetty, who is at the Indian, she's at Berkeley. Okay, then it also Paula Lucas, American Overseas Domestic Violence Crisis Center, Pathway, which of course, since I wasn't doing his job, became Pathways to Safety International. All the same bullshit. And with this is Karen Lewis. I had said before Karen White, but it's Karen Lewis. That's somebody else I know that's totally unrelated. So first off, the Hague Convention on International Child Abduction. The problem with that convention and those courts is that they only examine who has jurisdiction over, because this is just international divorce cases, custody battles. They only decide who has jurisdiction over the proceedings. And who cares what happened within that jurisdiction, which are human rights violations. So this is the big problem, if you follow me, first off, that I have with the Hague Convention on International Child Abduction. Because you are aiding and abetting the abusers, because many of these cases, the majority of these cases are, involved in some sort of domestic violence, domestic abuse situation. I mean, you do have, but even like the vindictive people, those are domestic abuse cases. Because anybody who is not abusive to their children or their spouse wouldn't do something like that unless the other person is putting that child in danger. I mean, this can be emotional danger or physical danger. Any parent would, I'm talking about a parent who cares about their children, and cares about anybody except themselves, would try and make the situation as easy and the least traumatic for their children. I mean, one of the domestic violence women, she said all the cases that end up in custody battles should be considered domestic abuse cases. And I agree, because 85% of the divorces that get into the courts, it's the partner, the two people, they decide, okay, this weekend, that weekend, they decide. And it should be. The other cases, the 15% is where we see the contentious, divorces and I mean, it gets into custody battles, but also the property issues. And that's another shit show. I won't get into that one right now. But so the Hague is kind of like the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court does not look at any procedural issues or any violation of rights of litigants at the lower courts. I still have a lot of questions about the Supreme Court. I got a book back there that I still need to read. So I have a lot of questions there. I really haven't researched that. But that's another thing that I'm like, wait a second, you guys, I want a colonoscopy here, and I'll do it. But on the back burner at the moment. But it's the same thing, the same parallel with the Hague Convention on International Child Abduction. They're not examining, why the parent is fleeing. They just say, oh, this is England or Spain or and then that is the court, and that's the one who decides what's going on. And forum shop, it's a freaking mess. And the Hague Convention on International Child Abduction, they're signing off on it because they're not overseeing this. They're just buying into the game. And that's what basically everybody is doing, and saying, well, no, this is serious shit. Instead of, oh, it's just divorce. It's just a custody battle. Who cares? I haven't seen my kids. I haven't been with my kids. Is it like 14 years? I've been thrown into absolute abject poverty, unemployable in my own country, but it's no big deal. Well, it's going to be no big deal when all you little ladies lose your farm to all of your victims. So, that's the issue that I have with the Hague Convention on International Child Abduction. Now, there is the Domestic Violence Project on the Hague Convention, something to that effect, which is led by Sudhi Shetty, who's been doing this. I came across this report at the beginning, so they've been doing this for over 15 years. And, over at Berkeley, there's a psychologist, Edison, I think his name is. He has the rhetoric that's on target. But she's, how should I say, examining what the Hague Convention on International Child Abduction is doing, but not challenging it. And there was a report, I covered this. This is in my report. I think it's actually the Family Courts in Crisis newsletters. So I cover, because what I do is a lot of times just a synopsis of what these people are doing and try and bring it all together and put together the big picture. So within that report, I saw Paula Lucas's name come up from the American Overseas Domestic Violence Crisis Center. I got a big problem with Paula Lucas. She's just, I know I've spoken about her, I think at least briefly. She's just another one of these window dressing NGOs, social climber. She even admits she's from small town in California, in the Highway 1 backwater, and married rich. See, this is when people say married rich. I'm like, can we please define rich? How many zeros does it have after? Because for some of you people, $100,000 is rich. Other people, that's their pocket change. I always say the only difference, and others, it's 100 billion. Well, we're getting into billion now. So it's all relative. I always have said
The only difference between a poor person and a rich person in this world is the poor person has a car he can't afford. Well, this is in the United States, a car he can't afford, and the rich person has a house he can't afford, or a yacht, you know, a house that he can't afford. The really rich have a yacht and mansions that they can't afford. That's the only difference between all these people. And, you know, she admits, so she gets into, I think it was Saudi Arabia, and, you know, she escapes. This buys into the Betty Mahmoudi story, which dates back to the 80s, I believe, rather than this, yeah, 80s. You know, never without my daughter. And this is the agenda. This is the narrative that's politically correct. Because I even remember, you know, some post, this is at the beginning, that somebody was telling me that, you know, what are you complaining about? Because I'm like, this is the same story with Betty Mahmoudi in, I forget if it was Iraq or Iran, that I had in Spain. And I got raked over the coals in the comments saying, how dare I compare my story with hers? Like, it's really no different. And in fact, I've been proving with the Spanish Constitution and my case, doesn't matter. You can put in the most utopian legal system. Bullshit. If your lawyers and the courts don't uphold those laws and those rights, they aren't worth anything. Now, basically, I'm like, all of the lawyers are taking the constitutions and using it as toilet paper. So, I mean, Paola Lucas, and I attended World Bank and Elizabeth LaGrange put together a little conference for Paola Lucas. I'm still at the IMF at this point. I'm at Institute for Capacity Development. Now, Paola Lucas, I'm going to see in the international courts, and Elizabeth LaGrange should know that. Why didn't Elizabeth LaGrange get me on a podium talking about these issues instead of giving a voice to Paola Lucas? And I'm being ousted onto the streets by the Institute for Capacity Development. I'm like, excuse me, you people are out of control. I mean, I went to the presentation, Paola Lucas, of course, it was to promote her book and sell her book and get lots of sympathy for her, you know, sad story. Believe me, there's worse than that I've seen, Paola. And then she had this Karen Lewis, human rights lawyer or whatever. She's there. So when they finish and everybody's, you know, their entourage, all of their fans, you know, move away, I go over to Paola and try and talk to her about all the research, because when I got back to the United States, I contacted her and the organization. Useless. Oh yeah, they gave me like an hour free session of, so I could cry on somebody's shoulder. Well, that was helpful. You know, there were a lot of things that were going on, but no, you know, if that's all you're offering nothing else than anybody else. She sent me some lawyers, the names of the organization. Some lawyers, 3 or 4, I think, that they had just grabbed off of the internet, some names. I can do that without their help, without them existing. And of course, when I contacted the lawyers had no idea why I was contacting them any more than I did. I'm like, excuse me, what are you ladies doing over there?
it's a fraudulent, NGO, just like everybody else. That's why they close them up. And now it's Pathway to Safety International. All of these NGOs, they may help a few people along the way with charity work, get them a little money or something. So then they get somebody who will get up on a podium and say how wonderful they are. But, 95 to 99% of what they are doing is just getting money. So a bunch of, experts can have a salary and do good in the world, do good in the world, which I've already talked about the doing good as well. So there we go. We get off on the feminist, you never get me started. And believe me, I went, never even read their, I didn't know anything about them except that they sounded always like men haters to me. They are. So, gosh, I guess I've gone on for a while here. Okay, this gets in again to the feminists. Maxine Waters, she's House Finance Committee. So when the Democrats get in this 2017, I think, and control Congress, Maxine Waters gets on to the head of the House Finance Committee. I'm like, oh, great, because the IMF and the World Bank are under the purview of the House Finance Committee. So again, I think I might have already talked about this. I call up everybody on the House Finance Committee. I say, okay, who's the staffer? Who's the staffer? I want an investigation into the IMF and World Bank. Pronto. So all the staffers get an email from me, including Maxine Waters. Now, I believe it's Maxine Waters' profile on Wikipedia. It could be Eleanor Holman Norton's, but I think it's Maxine Waters, like in the footnotes or I think it's in the footnotes. But there's a reference to a journalist. And again, this is going back years and years and years, maybe into the 1980s, into the 90s, I'm not sure, who exposed a story about how the CIA was actually like selling crack cocaine to African Americans in the United States to get them in, addicted and let's just say push along the drug consumption and addiction problem in this country and with crack cocaine amongst the Blacks, which corresponds to new Jim Crow type of activities. And this journalist, he was destroyed. Absolutely, he ended up committing suicide because he was exposing this. And I guess he went a little bit wacko, because that's another thing, you get involved in a conspiracy theory. That's bullshit. That's bullshit. So, I understand that he got caught up into that, and he had been destroyed financially. I think his family life had been destroyed, and he ended up committing suicide. However, this, I'm sorry, CIA, and a lot of times you have to ask yourself, well, are they capable of it? And if the answer to that is yes, then you want to say, okay, well, bring me the evidence. But sometimes, I saw, I posted it on a thumbnail. Governor Cuomo, like kissing Kerry Kennedy, and this is after they're divorced. I don't know, they're working on something, and I'm like, see, he does it to everybody. And I didn't see his ex-wife filing a complaint for sexual harassment on that thing. I mean, come on. So, ridiculous. So, you know, when it's you know, things that just don't fit, they don't fit. But when people come up with things that, yeah, that's plausible. So what is it? Opportunity, motive, and what's the other one? I forget. But you get my drift. You know, if it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it walks like a duck, it's most probably a duck. So, you know, Maxine Waters and every AOC is on that. And I think I've also said when I called AOC's office, they said, we don't yet have a staffer. I said, well, I'll send you my resume along with the information. So you're looking at a discrimination in your hiring practices lawsuit with me, as well as why aren't you people doing your job? Comes under your purview. Here's all the evidence. And there's this Kopovich, I think his name is, bails and bonds. It's again, a lot of these things I have to get the entire title of it. I got to Google it, but it's the only book. And I mean, he did a wonderful, wonderful job, and goes, it's a parallel of what I do, but he goes much more into the archives and the how shall I say, the actual policies of what the IMF has been all of these years. And I'm looking more at global, you know, I don't always get into all of the details that some of these people do, but my problem with them is fundamentally the same, and also because it's based on all of what these experts are saying. So, okay, so that's, you know, AOC, little lady, and the squad. I mean, what has that changed? It just brought a new, you know, looking to rule the roost up on Capitol Hill. Okay, so this one is pile 2. Maria Butina, founder, Right to Bear Arms. The Red Sparrow, Russian spy and gun activist arrested in US, pleaded guilty to conspiracy, to act as an illegal foreign agent, sentenced to 18 months in prison, infiltrated NRA annual meetings and escorted NRA executives to Moscow to meet Russian officials, affairs with GOP operative Paul Erickson, used to offer campaign meeting between Putin and Trump, liaison between NRA, GOP officials and Russian handler Alexander Torshin, who praised her espionage by email saying, "You have upstaged Russian spy Anna Chapman. She poses with toy pistols while you are being published with real ones." I mean, I'm not going to do this personal. Yeah, obviously, see, they're all in bed together. But what I love, she poses with toy pistols while you are being published with real ones. See, let's just make these wacko women and feminists as violent, and you know, the suicide bomber is the men. I don't see how that is advancing anybody except some wacko control freak women. And then I guess there was another thing. Russians. Oh, gun activists. I mean, you know, my father was a hunter, and particularly with the agrarians, you have to respect that they do have the tradition of this. And as I said this recently to my brother, I said, wait a second, I have no problem that people go hunting if they eat what they're, you know, killing. And quite frankly, I think it's a more humane life for these animals out in the wild. As I say again, we consume, you know, what we need and not exploit it. And even in France, with the French family that I was with, he had a farm, biggest farm on Ile-de-France. And he actually had a quota that he had to fill of deer, you know, okay, during the hunting season, because of course that's another thing. But hunters, you know, I mean, responsible hunters are aware of all of these things, and that, you know, they've got to also reproduce. And but it is they had to kill, you know, a certain number of deer every year, otherwise there'd be an overpopulation. You know, so as long as it's as long as you're consuming and, you know, respect the basics of owning a gun and handling a gun, that's not the same as the handguns and the assault weapons and the, you know, you don't need that to go quail shooting or you know, whatever. I mean, I'm kind of like, well, I'm not going hunting with you, and I'll cook it, but you got to clean it. So, and the bomb, this was back in the 80s. This is, I remember, because when they started up in the security up on Capitol Hill, it was a bunch of feminists. And I think it might have actually been under Clinton that they were pardoned. Why are the feminist terrorists being pardoned, but the others being waterboarded? So, okay, here's the third one. Alexander Nix, CEO, Cambridge Analytica, Black Hat, led shuttered data analytical firm founded by Stephen Bannon, which sold its scandal-plagued services to the Trump campaign and elections worldwide. Purchased and exploited Facebook data to compromise 50 million American users' info in a propaganda war to affect outcome of the 2016 presidential election. Contacted WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange in effort to obtain Hillary Clinton's hacked private emails for illicit use in Trump presidential campaigns. Okay, I'm gonna go quick on this. Can the candidates and the political parties please stop playing these games and start working for the people and look at the issues and address the issues? And when they get up on a podium to discuss it within a campaign, and we also need the you know, the mediators. Oh, and I'm sorry, I was listening to Megyn Kelly. I forget, it was earlier today or yesterday. Okay, I won't get into her. I got a card for her. But I mean, the 20, so it's the 2020 with the whole bandwagon of Democrats. I was like, you guys really, what the fuck? Never about the issues. Oh, and I mean, the Hillary Clinton Trump debate. My only defense with the Europeans all of these years about my government has been like, well, yeah, but you got Chirac and you got this guy and you got that guy. I always would tell them, the Europeans, I said, you know what? I think our governments and our people, because that's who vote them in, are in a competition of who can put the stupidest and most incompetent and immoral person into office as possible. Who can win the race? I don't know. I think the Americans are winning at this point. By a long shot. So, you know, I don't know where to begin because it's everybody. It's like when I, you know, when I would walk into a room of, you know, children, unruly children, and there's a mess all over the place, and I don't even ask who's responsible. I just say you're all responsible, and you better get moving to clean it up. And if I get any flack, you're gonna go in a corner, and you're gonna go in a corner. And they start scurrying around. Unfortunately, 2- and 3-year-old children are a little bit easier to pick up and put in their places than all the big wigs with overinflated egos. Okay, so let me do my favorite part. I actually got through the two. Okay, well, at least this has brought down my blood boiling from my Zoom meeting before this, because the ruling elite in this country, everywhere, because for a rude awakening. Everybody's looking la la land. I'm like, you guys, a year from now, we might be in a civil war. I mean, you know, how do you plan something a year from now and squabble about it for like an hour? Okay, we'll go there. So, first pile, second pile, third pile, I forget what we had. Oh, well, we had all of feminists here. So it was First Lady, I think. Okay, here, over there. What's this? Oh, anyway, I think it was like that. So the first pile, we've got their heads are gone if it please your majesty. On all my little feminist friends. I don't believe in capital punishment and the guillotine. Actually, the guillotine was a humane, something that they came up with that was humane compared to having an axe, because this was a clean cut. You didn't have any oops. So second pile is from the Queen, an invitation for the Duchess to play croquet. Well, we got some feminists in here, you know, the mediators, the IMF, Why do I keep on saying Nancy Reagan when I'm saying Hillary Obama? Freudian sleep. Yes, little queens, I invite you all to come and play croquet with me. Third pile. Tweedledum said Tweedledee had spoiled his nice new rattle. Well, again, oh, Sudasheti and all of you at the Hague Convention on International Child Abduction, children are being raped and killed and tortured, and you're fighting over who has jurisdiction under this over this shit show. Spoiled his nice new rattle. For me, the knaves of hearts, he stole those tarts and took them quite away. Well, tarts in British is a whore. In fact, Princess Margaret, this is going back when 1958 was the last Charlotte's Ball, the debutante Charlotte's Ball in London didn't finish, but that was the last time that the Queen presided over that. And Prince Philip thought that stuff was a bunch of BS. And Princess Margaret said it just attracted a bunch of tarts. Of course. So yes, the knaves of hearts. He stole those tarts and took them quite away. Would somebody please evacuate Washington of all the little tarts that control it? I got their names. I got their names. I got their number. Okay, so have a nice evening, and well, have a nice Labor Day. I'll see you tomorrow. Believe me, I stay in my little the cave dweller of Washington. Oh, everybody's crazy in this town. Oh, and everywhere I know. Lord help us. Okay, have a nice evening. Good night. Bye-bye.